Hey, everybody. We want to welcome you to another week of Cottage College worship. These next couple weeks are going to be a little bit different, but it's a really good type of different. So I've asked a couple of my really good friends to fill in for me for the next couple weeks. And this week just so happens to be the president of the University of Mobile. So everyone, please welcome with me Dr. Burnett. Y'all worship with us.
What is up, Cottage College? If it's your first time joining us, my name is Luke, and I'm the worship leader for the college service at Cottage Hill. This is a very intense situation. It's very crazy still. And what it has shown me is that it is the least busy that I've been in the 3 years of me being in college. I haven't had this much time to truly just rest in a very, very long time. And I'm grateful for it. And my fiance showed me a verse today that really reminded me of that. It's in Matthew chapter 11, and it's verses 28 through 30. And it says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Tonight, Josh will not be speaking. Dr. Burnett will be speaking. But I want to encourage you guys to just focus in on that, the true rest and peace of Jesus, and worship in that. I want to encourage you guys not to take advantage of this time that we have to truly rest and refocus our hearts on Jesus. So yeah, just worship with me. Shackled to the way I was, so I'm gonna live like my chains are gone, gone. Now my sin is dead and gone, and I sing hallelujah. Done, done. He is risen, it is done, and I sing hallelujah. That will overcome. I'm gonna shout like the battle's won. So fall back, devil, every time is up. I'm gonna live like the stone is gone, gone. Now my sin is dead and gone, and I sing hallelujah. I sing hallelujah. How great the power of the blood. Oh, oh, I am the righteousness of God. Oh, oh. How great the power of the blood. Oh, oh, I am the righteousness of God. Oh, oh, gone, gone. Now my sin is dead and gone, and I sing hallelujah. Done, done. He is risen, it is done, and I sing hallelujah. Oh, 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 oh. See him there, the great I am, a crown of thorns Father's heart displayed for us. Oh God, we thank you for the cross. Lifted up on Calvary's hill, we cursed your name, and even still you bore our shame and paid the cost. Oh God, we thank you for the cross. Behold the Lamb, the story of redemption written on his hands. Jesus, you will reign forevermore. The victory is yours. We sing your praise, endless hallelujah to your holy name. Jesus, you will reign forevermore. The victory is yours. Offer up the sacrifice for every sin. Our Savior died, the Lord of life can't be contained. Oh, our God has risen from the grave. Oh, our God has risen from the grave. Oh, behold, behold the Lamb, the story of redemption written on his hands. Jesus, you will reign forevermore. The victory is yours. We sing your praise, endless hallelujah to your holy name. Jesus, you will reign forevermore. The victory is yours. And when the age of death is done, we'll see your face, bright as the sun. We'll bow before the King of Kings. Oh God, forever we will sing. Behold the Lamb, the story of redemption written on his hands. Jesus, you will reign forevermore. The victory is yours. We sing your praise, endless hallelujah to your holy name. Jesus, you will reign forevermore. The victory is yours. The victory is yours.
Good evening, students at Cottage Hill Baptist Church. What a pleasure to talk to you tonight. Greetings from the University of Mobile. I want to thank Josh for the invitation. Tonight, I want to talk about a word that has meant a lot to me over the last year in this office as president. If you're a student at our university, you see the word purpose all over the place, on marketing signs, on brochures. The word purpose, though, to me, is a fascinating word because it's a word that, if we're not careful, it kind of becomes just a slogan and we overlook what that really means. You know, a motto is a fun thing, but it can become just a cliche. If you use it again and again, it kind of loses its effectiveness. A great example from history, I've often wondered why it is we can use the phrase, "In God we trust," on our money, And we can still say things like one nation under God in our pledge. It's not because the secular people have not tried to remove them. As a matter of fact, they have many times. There was a Supreme Court case back in 1984. The case was Lynch versus Donnelly. This case went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court about those very phrases. The court in this case said it's fine to use those. But the reason it was fine, I find fascinating. The court said they invoked the phrase ceremonial deism. Justice Brennan, in the majority opinion, said those phrases are fine because, and I quote here, they have lost through rote repetition any significant religious context. You see what he said? He said there, those are fine because they're just words that nobody means anyway. So tonight, let's think about purpose. You as a college student, this is a great time to focus on purpose. I guess the big question is there a purpose for my life? Does God have a purpose? How do I find that purpose? And then how do I go pursue it? Our text tonight is 3 quick verses out of 2 Timothy chapter 2. We'll look at verses 20, 21, and 22. Now, in these verses, look at this great contrast. In verse 20, in a large house, it says, there are many articles, not only of gold and silver, but also of wood and clay. Look at this contrast. Some, it says, are for special purposes. Some are for common use. See that contrast between special and common? Don't forget that. Verse 21, those who cleanse themselves from the latter, that's that common use, will be instruments for a special purpose, made holy, useful to the master, and prepared to do any good work. Then verse 22, flee the evil desires of youth and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace, along with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart. These 3 verses, to me, there's a very simple analogy. I would compare this to going to war. If I, God forbid, were in charge of sending folks to war, I would want to know at least 2 or 3 things. First of all, I would say, what is our objective or purpose in going to war? Then I would say, okay, if I've got that purpose, how then do I prepare for the war? And then finally, step 3, I would then launch the attack. We can use those 3 points in these 3 verses. So let's ask first of all, is there a purpose to life? Back in verse 21, there's that contrast. It talks of a purpose, but it says there's a common purpose, but there's also a special purpose. The illustration is simple. It talked about a big house and the utensils. We all know we've got nice, fine china, but we've also got paper plates we use for common occurrences here. There's a contrast between those 2 purposes. At our university, you see that phrase all the time, higher education for a higher purpose. Well, if we use that, we've got to ask then, what is that higher purpose? College students, what do you see as the purpose of an education? Is it to get a good job, to make money, to gain knowledge? These are all great things. There's nothing wrong with any of those, but I guess the question is, what is our ultimate purpose? In Romans chapter 8, verse 28, we see these words. We know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to His purpose. There's the key. When we think of purpose, it's often, okay, what is my purpose? That's great, but the extra question should be, what is His purpose? Is there a higher purpose beyond just what we think of as jobs, money, career, things like that? The great theologian C.S. Lewis once said, education without values seems to make man a more clever devil. That's very good. You can educate folks to be evil. So there must be a purpose beyond just what we think of as that purpose. Now, here's the danger. As a college student, as an old person like me, The dangerous thinking, God cannot use me, or I don't have a purpose. Now, here's a story, true story, that you'll believe I'm making up, but it's a true story. In India, there's a 27-year-old man who is suing his parents, which is in itself kind of strange, but he's suing his parents because he says, now watch this, he says he did not give his parents explicit consent to bring him into this world. Let that sink in. He's suing his parents because he didn't say it's okay for you to have me. Now, he's part of a movement. There's a group called the anti-natalist who are against people having children. They say because life is so bad and so meaningless, you do your kids a disservice to bring them into this world. Now, at the university in higher education, we've got a word for people such as this. We call them idiots. There's a purpose. God's got a purpose for our lives. I love this quote. Mark Twain once said, "The two most important days of your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why." Students, don't fall for the trap thinking life is just a series of events with no rhyme, no reason, or no meaning. We have got a purpose. In 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 9, look at these words. He has saved us and called us with an holy calling, not according to our works, but according to his own purpose. There's that word again. And grace, which was given us in Christ Jesus before the world began. In my mind, it's not a question if there's a purpose. The question is, what purpose will we follow? Now, there's a good case of this in the Old Testament. Not every purpose will stand the test of time. I believe Solomon was the best case of a person who tried to find purpose in life. If you go to the book of Ecclesiastes, in the first chapter, Solomon says this, meaningless. The King James uses the word vain or vanity, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything, he said, was meaningless. In verse 3, he says, what do people gain from all their labors in which they toil under the sun? If you read that entire chapter, Solomon says, everything I look at, everything I see, I cannot find any purpose in life. If you look at the next chapter, in chapter 2 of Ecclesiastes, he tried it all. He tried wisdom. He tried pleasure. He tried working. He tried wealth. He tried it all. There was nothing withheld from Solomon. In Ecclesiastes 2, verse 10, we hear this. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. That sounds a lot like some of us today. We try everything to try to find that purpose. But is what we're trying, will that stand up to the test of time? Look what Solomon said in the next verse. It's kind of a sad verse, by the way, but he said this, yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. That is a very depressing verse because Solomon says, although I had everything I wanted, it was still meaningless. That tells me he did not find that special purpose. So I guess back to our first question, is there a purpose? Well, what does the scripture say about that? In Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 5, here's a good answer. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. That verse tells me that God gave me a purpose long, long ago. Still in Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11. Look at this. I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. There's a purpose that God has ordained for our lives. In Psalms 139, verse 14, the psalmist said this, I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Students, do not fall for the trap in thinking I have got no purpose. God has said, I've given you a purpose. I've got plans for you. I've got plans to bless you if you follow my purpose. Well, let's go to the second point. If there's indeed a purpose, back to our analogy, it is now time to prepare. So the preparation's big. Once we've determined that purpose, that we've got one, it's now time to prepare. And back in 2 Timothy verse 21, those who cleanse themselves, note that verb, from the latter will be instruments for special purposes, made holy, useful to the master, and prepared to do any good work. Notice this preparation involves choices. We can say I've got a purpose, but at some point we must prepare, we must choose to follow that purpose. In Psalms 25, verse 4, I love these words, show me your ways, Lord, teach me your path. Notice those verbs, show me, teach me. That requires preparation on my part. In Romans chapter 9, verse 21, does not the potter have the right to make out the same lump of clay, some pottery for special purposes and some for common use? Here's this choice. We can chase that common purpose or we can chase that special purpose. That's that higher purpose we like to speak of. The verse implies we must cleanse ourselves. Now, what does that mean? It means we must establish priorities. What is it that we value? There are so many things today that draw our attention. The younger folks today, more than me at your age, there are so many things that vie for our time. So many things want our attention, from our phones to our TVs to whatever. There are so many things that can distract us. The question becomes, what then do we value? You know, were I nosy, I could tell pretty quick what you value as you could do to me. If I looked at your bank account and your day planner or your phone calendar, I could tell pretty much what it is you value. Where's your money going? Where's your time going? There are legitimate concerns when it comes to education. Back to the thing about we need good jobs. I would never discount that. We do. That's a crucial part of an education. You want that to get the very best job. You want a good career. You want to make a very good living. Jesus, by the way, never said, don't worry about that. But he did say in Matthew chapter 6, verse 33, seek ye first his kingdom and his righteousness, and these things will be given to you as well. Notice, he didn't say these things are evil necessarily, but he did say seek first his kingdom. There are those priorities. In my mind, back to these verses, back to purpose, that is that higher purpose, or what Timothy calls that, in 2 Timothy, what it says, that special purpose. I do love that phrase there. Now, back to the analogy. We know there's a purpose. We've prepared for that purpose. Is that enough? Have we now reached our final objective? The answer is no. Preparation's good. What's wrong with that in itself? An example. My daughter, Lauren, who is now 32 years old, she was a good student in high school, in middle school. She was the very best I ever saw at preparing to study. Some of you guys might be this way too. What does that mean? The night before a test, she would go to Walmart. She would buy note cards, colored markers, dividers. She would spend a couple of hours preparing to study for a test. At least 2 hours preparing. then she'd go to bed. Well, what's wrong with that? Sometimes you prepare and never launch that attack. Back to the analogy a while ago, our third step would be to launch that attack. So we've got a purpose, we've got preparation. Number 3 is the word pursuit. We will now pursue that purpose. Back to 2 Timothy chapter 2. In verse 23, it says, flee the evil desires of youth and do what? Pursue. There's that word. Pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace, along with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart. We choose what we pursue. Now, here's the question. I think we all pursue something. But do we know why we're pursuing what we pursue? Example, dogs chase cars. Why? Why do dogs chase cars? If the dog catches the car, what next? Who knows? A better story. I'm told years ago at a greyhound racing track. I don't condone greyhound racing, but at a greyhound racing track, the dogs chase a mechanical rabbit, I'm told. They chase this thing each night. When they get toward the end of the race, the rabbit disappears into the chute, and the dogs go back to the kennel, I guess, for the next night. One night in Florida, the conveyor system broke down. The rabbit stopped right in the middle of the track. The first dog got there, caught the rabbit, took one big chomp out of the rabbit there. The dog broke 2 teeth and realized that was a plastic rabbit. Now, true story, that dog would never race again. Why not? He realized all these years I've been chasing a fake rabbit. Now, is that us? Do we find out once we've gained what we're after, do we find out that did not satisfy? It happened to Solomon. He chased everything and nothing would satisfy. He chased fake rabbits. Pursuit involves a focus. In Philippians chapter 3, verse 14, familiar verse, I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. I press toward that mark. That word press to me means a focus, a laser focus. If you ever see me in town in my car with my wife is always driving. And people ask me why. It's not because I need a chauffeur. My wife will not let me drive because when I drive, I like to kind of watch the scenery, which is okay, I guess. But if I'm on the interstate and I see a farm, I look toward the farm, I'll drive toward the farm. So that's very dangerous. She will say to me, I'll drive, you look at the scenery, right? We do that in life. On our pursuit of a purpose, we get distracted sometimes. We end up veering off the path because other things draw our attention. Now, students, when it comes to you and pursuing your passion, pursuing your purpose, people will ask me, how do I know what to pursue? My first piece of advice is always this: follow your passion. Parents sometimes, God love them, I have to tell parents sometimes, don't always tell your student, you should major in what I majored in, or you should do this because this will make you lots of money. Nothing wrong with that, but I cannot imagine anything in life more devastating than going to a job every day that I did not like. I know folks like that. You know, I've been blessed. I've been a teacher for 41 years. I have found somebody for the last 41 years to pay me to do what I love to do. Every day is a joy. It's not work, it's what I love to do. Follow your passion. It also, by the way, doesn't mean perfection. We sometimes say, I've got this purpose I believe, but I'm scared to follow this because I may not be perfect. Well, that's where God comes in. God says, follow me. I'll give you strength. You follow me. You follow my purpose. Let me handle the details. Don't be afraid of failure. Some folks will not launch this attack in this pursuit of a purpose because they're afraid I might fail. My favorite baseball player from the 1970s and 80s was Reggie Jackson. He was a strange case, played for the Oakland A's, the Yankees, later on the Angels, mainly with the New York Yankees. But Reggie Jackson, to this day, he holds the major league record for most times as a batter striking out. He struck out over 2,500 times. Still the record. But he's in the Hall of Fame. How can that be? Because when he didn't strike out, he had a lot of home runs, over 500 home runs, made 14 all-star teams, I think won 5 world championships. I like this guy for a reason. When he did strike out, it was exciting. This guy never took a third strike. He went down swinging. I tell students, I tell you, if you go out in life, if you fail, at least fail swinging. Don't get caught looking. Fail taking your best shot. That's what Reggie Jackson did. In my mind, that's what we do. Follow that passion, that godly pursuit, that godly passion with all your heart. Don't be afraid of failing. At least swing for the fences. Now, getting close to wrapping up here. Notice I have not yet identified the purpose. I have said there is a purpose. I've said we must prepare for the purpose and then pursue it. But the big question then is, what is that purpose? Well, if there's a higher purpose, what is it? Let's go back to Solomon. After a lot of soul searching, Solomon did at least figure out that purpose. If you go to the last chapter of Ecclesiastes, chapter 12, in verse 13, he said this, "Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God," he said, "and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man." Look at that. Here's a guy that had tried everything. And he says, here's the whole deal. This is it. You fear God, you keep his commandments, for that's the whole duty of man. You know, we try to make things complicated. Jesus would say the same thing. When asked about the commandments, Jesus said, here's the greatest: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. We try to make things too complicated. It's a very simple message. When it comes to our purpose and our passion in life, God has said, yes, there's a purpose. God has said we must pursue that purpose. There, again, I say and I plead, don't fall in this trap of thinking, I'm just here. I'm just one of many, and God can't use me. The last thing I will leave you with is this. In this group tonight, this purpose cannot be pursued unless that first step toward Christ has been taken. If by chance anyone watching this video tonight, if you say, I would like to find the purpose God has for me, but I need to know God first, here's your chance. Wherever you are right now, you can ask Christ into your life, and you can ask Christ for salvation. At that point, when the Spirit indwells you, God can reveal that purpose, and you can then pursue it. Again, thank you for the chance to speak tonight. God bless you guys at Cottage Hill. Thank you for listening.